What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile. And now this deck isn't really related to the ban list like all the other deck profiles I've been doing were. However, this is the deck that I've been having a lot of, fun with in my free time. And so today I'd like to bring it to you. And that deck that it is, the deck that I'd like to bring to you is Airpod Max. Now, the reason it's called that is because a couple of years ago there was a deck called Invoked Airpods, something along that line, or just Airpods, where it was quite literally just as many non-engine as you could fit in the deck, and then as many cards to force interaction points against your opponent as possible that had as little dedicated inputs that you'd have to do as possible, if that made sense. So essentially, it was a deck where every individual card would either force an interaction out of your opponent, or if they didn't force an interaction, it would end on an end board piece that would interact with your opponent during their turn, basically forcing them to either interact with this card or have to deal with interaction during their turn. So I wanted to try and translate that into the modern day, so here I have Airpod Maxes. Every single card in this deck is meant to be doing as much as possible to either make an end board piece or interact or force interaction from our opponents throughout every step of our turn, and basically play super low to the ground, where basically any one card that we open in our hand is being able to do something. So that's enough yapping about the overall deck profile. Let's go through the card by cards, and then afterwards let's do a test game. Starting off, we're on Triple Alistair the Invoker. Everyone knows this card on normal summon gets to add an invocation, and then if it's in your hand, you can discard it and target a fusion monster you control, and it'll gain 1,000 attack till the end of the turn. Incredibly powerful effect. One card Mechaba functionally. You go normal summon Alistair, go into an Artemis, and then go into a Mechaba. Ideally, you want to be opening Alistair paired alongside one of the Kashtiras, ideally going to be Unicorn. So we're able to special Unicorn first, get Kashtira Birth, then normal summon Alistair, and then instead of just using the invocational Artemises on our side of the field, we can link them off for a Moon of the Closed Heaven and go Fiendsmith line first, and then make Mechaba. Or we can make Mechaba before we commit more into the Fiendsmith line to play around Nibiru, which is really, really cool. So we're on triple copies of Alistair, 2 copies of Invocation, allowing us to summon a fusion monster from our extra using monsters from our hand or field, or if we summon an Invoked, we can banish cards from either graveyard as material as well. It also allows us to add it back to our deck by putting a banished Alistair back in our hand, which is very useful for recurrence. Being able to go at normal summon Alistair every turn is incredibly useful for the grind game. We're on triple copies of Meltdown, preventing our fusion spells from being interacted with, which we're not really expecting our opponent to really interact with Invocation, so not too big of a deal. Maybe a bigger deal if you're playing something like Branded Fusion. But also on activation, it adds Alistair from deck to hand, so we're not just playing 3 copies, we're actually playing 7, being triple Meltdown and 1 copy of Terraforming. For Kashtiras, we're on triple copies of Fenrir, triple copies of Unicorn, and 2 copies of Kashtira Birth. This is another central focus point of the deck, being Kashtira Birth. A lot of players will overlook this card as just a card Kashtira searches along the way of just gaining advantage. However, this card is incredibly impactful for the game at almost every point. This card allows us to act as to normal summon a level 7 monster without tributing, although we're not really going to be doing that too much because our dedicated normal is going to be Alistair. However, we can add Ignition, special summon a non-Xyz Kashtira that's banished or in our graveyard, which is going to be the Unicorn that we're presumably linking off to make Moon of the Closed Heaven, so we get to end on Unicorn still, as well as the effect as if your opponent activates a spell card or effect and you control a Kashtira monster, we can target exactly 3 of our opponent's cards in their graveyards and banish them face down, which is incredibly powerful in this metagame, which is centralized around Fiendsmith and Ryziel cards. So being able to banish those cards, as well as Malices in our opponent's graveyard, like a White Binder, for example, can shift the entire tone of the game. We're also on double copies of Pressure Planet Raisos, which is basically buffs our entire team based on the attributes that are currently on board, as well as on activation will add a Kashtira from deck to hand, either Fenrir or Unicorn. But that's it for our Kashtiras. We're also playing the Fiendsmiths, because I did mention Moon of the Closed Heaven earlier. We're on triple copies of Engraver, 1 copy of Lacrima, and 1 copy of Tract, as well as a Fiendsmith in Paradise to send to the graveyard off of Lacrima, and a copy of Fabled Lurie to add from deck to hand with Fiendsmith Tract. That's it for our basically engines. We're playing 3 different ones in our deck, Invoked, Kashtira, and Fiendsmith, but we're also on cards to mitigate hand traps that our opponents are going to be using against us, being triple copies of Triple Tactics Thrust, 1 copy of Triple Tactics Talents, and 1 copy of Call by the Grave. For our own hand traps, we're on triple copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, triple copies of Effect Veiler, and triple copies of Infinite Impermanence. In our extra deck, for our Fiendsmith related cards, we're on 1 copy of Moon of the Closed Heaven, 1 copy of Fiendsmith Requiem, 1 copy of Fiendsmith Sequence, a Baoku the Lightless Shadow, 1 copy of DDD Wave High King Caesar, 1 copy of Necroquip Princess, and 1 copy of Fiendsmith Desiree. We're not playing the Link 3 or the big fusion monster because those are just not really high value enough for this deck. We want each individual card to be doing enough, and our extra deck is quite tight in this list specifically. The only card that I could even consider cutting would be maybe either a copy of Invoked Makaba or a copy of Invoked Agodes. But, you know, you can't really have everything, and I would prefer the removal of Agodes and the extra negation and, you know, guaranteed fact of Makaba, the second one, of course. We're on 1 copy of Espinus Little Knight, 1 copy of Artemis the Magistus Moon Maiden in order to manufacture a light monster in our graveyard when we're going first that isn't a Fiendsmith, 1 copy of Salamangreat Almirage in order to manufacture a fire monster in our graveyard if we needed to get Alistair off the board and we needed a fire for OTKs. Speaking of OTKs, this is our 8 OTK tool being Invoked Purgatrio. Needs Alistair and a fire. This card gains 200 attack for each card your opponent controls, can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each, and it does piercing battle damage. If we make this card and then use an Alistair in hand, it can get to some spectacular numbers and clear our opponent's entire board, opening the route for OTKs, especially against deck like Malice that lower their own life points throughout the course of their turn. We're also on the 1 copy Invoked Agodes, like I mentioned. It needs Alistair and any fusion monster. If it's special summoned or a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, we can pop a card our opponent controls that it's a monster, and you can only use this effect of Agodes once per turn. And then also Ignition effect once per turn, we can banish a fusion monster from our graveyard, and that this card gains that monster's attack until the end of our opponent's turn, which is quite nice for making this card nice and chonky. We're also on 1 copy of Invoked Kaliga in order to lock down board states. It needs Alistair plus a dark monster. Each player can only attempt to activate 1 monster effect each turn, and each player can only attack with 1 monster during each battle phase, functionally locking down our opponent until they out our Kaliga after 1 monster effect activation is incredibly useful given how many monster effects need to really be activated in order to realistically out a card. Like, Fiendsmith can out a card by using its Ignition effect on board, but in order to get it on board, what are you going to have to do? You're either going to have to use Fiendsmith effect in graveyard, and how are you getting it in the graveyard? By discarding it, so the graveyard effect is already the second effect, so you can't do that anymore. And same with Requiem. Once we use Requiem to tribute itself to special summon a Fiendsmith, for example, if we haven't used any monster effects to get there, well, Requiem was a monster effect, so we can't use the Fiendsmith Engraver on board effect either. So, really useful card if you're in one of those specific game states, but it is weak to spell and trap interaction. And then lastly, we're on double copies of Invoked Makaba, which is an Omni Negate by pitching the same type of card that our opponent's activating, and it doesn't just negate, it also banishes the card that's activating. That can be a pro against most strategies like Ryzeal and such, especially when you're negating something like a Detonator. However, it is a weakness of this deck against Malice because you are not really allowed to negate any of the Malice monster names at any point unless your opponent has already used the banish effect to special summon them previously. So it's a little bit weaker against Malice, but if we're going against Malice, we could always not really rely too much on the invoked plays, or rather use the invoked plays to negate stuff that isn't exactly Malice monsters. But that's it for our main and our extra. Now let's cover our side. Every single video I mentioned, the side is going to be completely subjective to what your local metagame is or what you're expecting to play against, so feel free to change this side in whichever way you see fit. So in our side deck, we're on Mulcharmies of triple Perulia and triple Fuelos. We're on triple copies of Evenly Matched for when we're going second, because this deck actually does have a little bit of an issue against back row heavy strategies. So we're siding in Evenly Matched in order to, help us out a little bit in that front. We're also on triple copies of Solemn Strike for when we're going first, ideally going to be siding out a hand trap like Effect Veiler. And then other cards that we're on, these are going to be our thrust targets, which is going to be one copy of Dimensional Barrier. If we're going first and we know we're against Ryzeal, we are always siding this in. And then one copy of Ultimate Slayer. Again, if we're going second against Ryzeal, we're always siding this in. Or if we're going second against either a Fusion a Link or an Xyz deck, we can also side this in because those are the types of cards we are playing. The one type we're not playing is going to be Synchro. And then, you know, an Xyz that we're playing for Ultimate Slayer, we're hopefully not going to be sending DDD Wave High King Caesar. Hopefully we're going to be sending the last card in our side deck being Neurological Aggregator, which just, when it's sent to the graveyard, will negate a face-up card on the field for the rest of the turn. But that's about it for the deck profile. Now let's hop into a quick test game. Alrighty, here we are in the game. This is in Ranked, of course. I always do all my test games in Ranked. So let's go for Rock, and let's hopefully win this Rock, Paper, Scissors. Our opponent went for Scissors, so we did win it. So let us go first, and let's see what we're able to set up. It looks like our opponent is going to be on 52 cards in their main deck, 15 in their extra. And we opened quite competent. We are going to be able to actually set up pretty much everything with this hand. So let's start off with the Terraforming to fish for an Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. They do not have one. We do Lucid Droll. That was a misplay if they do have a Droll and Lockbird, but this hand was always going to Lucid Droll if that was the case. Let's activate Wraithsoth. Let's add a Kashtira. Let's add Kashtira Unicorn from our deck to our hand. And let us keep playing from here. Let's special summon our Kashtira Unicorn to prevent hand traps later in the turn. And let's go Unicorn effect in order to add Kashtira Birth. Now we don't need our Wraithsoth anymore, so let's activate Magical Meltdown. Let's go Meltdown effect to add an Alistair the Invoker from our deck to our hand. We're then going to normal summon that Alistair the Invoker, and we're going to go Alistair effect in order to add another invocation from our deck to our hand. And then here, we're going to go into an Artemis with our Alistair. After that, then we are going to be going Fiendsmith Engraver effect. We're going to go Engraver to pitch in order to add Attract from our deck to our hand. Keep in mind, this is 3 summons that we've conducted here. So here we are going to go Unicorn and Artemis to go into a Moon of the Closed Heaven. And then here, we're going to go into an Invocation. This is going to be playing around Nibiru for us. So, in order to play around Nibiru, we're going Invocation here for summon number 5. We're going to banish Alistair in our Artemis in order to go into an Invoked Makaba, and now we're insulated against Nibiru. But first and foremost, let's go Invocation in order to add that Alistair back to our hand so we have a guaranteed monster so they know that. And we're going to be able to continue from this junction. So here we are going to be able to go Moon into a Requiem. We're going to be able to go Requiem effect in order to summon a Lacrima from our deck. And then we're going to be able to go Lacrima effect here in order to take a dump. Here we do want to be sending Fiendsmith in Paradise, since we already have an Engraver in the graveyard. Then we're going to be able to go Engraver effect here. Actually, let's go Requiem effect to target our Lacrima. Let's get a DDD Wave High King Caesar set up. Since we have the Paradise in order to send the Desiraiser interaction, so we don't need to go for that line. So let's go for a Necroquip Princess. Then let's go for an Engraver. Let's put back this Moon of the Closed Heaven, so we have our Lacrima Requiem set up for next turn. Our Fiendsmith Engraver is now on board. And now let us make a DDD Wave High King Caesar. We're going to go Kashtira Birth here. We're going to go Birth effect in order to special summon. Here we're going to special summon our Kashtira Unicorn to our side of the board. And then here there is the possibility where we can go Invocation again. Makaba is technically not a once per turn, so we could make another one. Although there isn't really all too much to be gaining from making a second copy of Makaba. So, our opponent is going to surrender because they are not going to be able to beat our board. There was another play where we'd be able to go Tract for Lurie and use Lurie as material with Unicorn to go into an SP Little Knight if we didn't feel the need to keep a cash on board. Although I was most likely to be keeping all the cards in hand. But that's going to be about the end of the video. Thank you all so much. But that's going to be the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, if you still are. Thank you to my one member. Thank you, Ari. If you want to become a member, please stay tuned to the end of all my videos where I go over details for that there. but if just watching the videos supports me a lot. So thank you again for watching if you are, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Bye bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh and the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or two before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.